village gathering by acknowledging the territory, the traditional and unceded territory of the Shianu people. And the Shianu people, Shianu means salmon people. And it really is a privilege for us, those of us who live here, who work here, who learn here, to live and learn and work every day on this territory. We are here as guests, and we pay tribute to and respect that reality every day. And the acknowledgement is really a way of opening a conversation. It's not supposed to be we acknowledge the territory and that's the end of it. It's actually a reminder that this is an ongoing conversation and a relationship that needs to continue to be cultivated and respected. The leader of the Shianu people, also known as DÉSIRÉE, is Chief Russ Chips, who is with us here today, and it is my honor to introduce him to you. So, Russ, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to DÉSIRÉE, Chiana, home of the salmon people. It's great to be back here. I met your student the other day, and I'm glad to meet all you guys today, and welcome to year one for the very first time. Make sure that you understand that you're truly welcome here. Sometimes you go to a foreign place and you don't feel like you're fitting in and part of the group or part of the greater scheme of things. Make sure you year ones do feel like you're truly welcome here, personally welcome here by me. So welcome to DÉSIRÉE, welcome to Chiana. We have a long history with Pearson College. A lot of it's been really great. Some of it's been bad. We didn't get along. We didn't talk to each other. But that's all changed. We now talk to each other. We now engage with each other. In the upcoming few months, a portion of Pearson College will become TSL lands. We've negotiated that it will become treaty settlement lands. And that is going to be one of the first times that, well, it is going to be the first time that private land will be transferred into TSL land. So that's very historic. And that shows the state of our relationships. We're not just waving at each other on the street, pretending to be nice. We're actually sitting down having a true, solid, legitimate conversation. And that legitimate conversation probably sprouts from seeds that are grown through Colwood, Langford, the western communities. DÉSIRÉE and the western communities have now really joined together as a family, not just communities, families. We sit down, we talk to each other, we engage each other in commerce, we engage each other in political values and stands. So it's just been really great to be here. I'm honored to be here. I really thank Desiree and Ty and Deanna for the things that they've helped us overcome. I remember our elder down at the cafeteria talking about his name. His name's used over at Great Rocks, and it was not being used with his permission of sorts. It was used. There was some way he used it, but he didn't fully give that permission. And Desiree, Deanna, Ty, I'm sorry, I forgot he was in charge of the head of the board. Tony, they all came out and they corrected that. And I remember as they were correcting it, our elder, who's very gruff, he's sit down. I thought I told you to sit down kind of guy, like he's very gruff. And I see the tear in his eye because they gave us 2 scholarships. And when they did that, he started crying, and I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen him cry before. And because he's not mean, but he scares me sometimes. I said, you're an old softy inside. So I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy that our relationship's growing. I'm happy that the students are here, and if there's any way you guys need support from me, I'm just around the corner. I can be reached through Desiree or Deanna or Ty. Please feel free to come over and visit me, have coffee. I'm happy to be around and happy to be here. A lot of times you see, I'll go to a lot of things and they ask me to speak. And sometimes that's just because they want some guy from the nation to speak. That doesn't occur here. And I don't actually go to those types of events. I go to true, legitimate reconciliation events. People talk about reconciliation. People say they're going to do some reconciliation. People have meetings about thinking about doing reconciliation. But what happens in this community and between Beecher Bay and Christian College is reconciliation. So we're actually physically doing it. We're not just thinking about it or celebrating something that we would have, should have. We don't need to sit around and inform how it's going to look like. We just actually make it up as we go. So thank you guys for coming. You feel welcome to be here, and thank you very much.
I know that Chief Chips has a busy day, as always. Lots happening right now. A call to action for Pearson, for each individual and the institution as a whole, to think about and then act upon ways to participate in reconciliation in a meaningful, authentic way. And I believe we have a special responsibility at Pearson because we have the ability to respond, so we have the responsibility. And that's partly because we are, in our own way, a residential school. But we are a residential school that is founded on the principles of inclusivity and intercultural understanding, the very opposite of the principles and practices that characterized the residential schools that were essentially genocide schools. And so I believe we have a special responsibility. And so again, I'm reissuing the call to action for each of us to think about individually and institutionally what we can do to contribute meaningfully to reconciliation, to use Chief Chips' term. And so with that, I know we've been thinking and working. Corey, who's an alum from year 14, is also a board member, an important member, volunteer member of our board. And she was invited to join the board for many, many reasons, one of which, importantly, is her experience and her expertise in reconciliation. And we are making very deliberate efforts to engage more people in this, that we have an inclusive and positive approach to reconciliation in developing an Indigenous vision, in not just recruiting more Indigenous students, but providing real support and learnings for all of our students. And so really with that, I would like to turn things over now to Corey. I want to thank you. I know this has been a little bit heavy. Our students often say, let's be authentic, let's be real. This is real, I hope. Certainly I feel it is. It's a bit of a heavy way to start, but we have an important responsibility. All of us who have been chosen to come study here, all of us who have chosen to work and live here, we have an important responsibility to each other and to this planet. And that, I think, needs to frame really all that we do here. So thank you so much. Welcome. There'll be some fun things happening later today. There'll be ice cream on the community lawn. Tomorrow we'll be serving up ice cream. It's now called Community Lawn because I have the privilege of having the most beautiful views on campus. So please come and hang out there, have your advising lunches there, have classes there, use the space, it's awesome. And with that, I turn things over to you, Corey. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am so excited to be here. As Desiree said, I'm year 14. I can't believe I'm that old. I'm barely over 40, but I don't know how that happened. It seems so long ago. I just actually finished my 30-year Pearson College reunion. So about a week ago, or 10 days ago, we left campus, and I encourage everyone, no matter what, and Benoit, I know you will agree, attend your reunions. They're absolutely incredible. They're each different. The 10-year, 20-year, 30-year are always very different. from each other. But I'm just going to have Leslie and Marcia introduce themselves, and then I'll have a little chat, and then they'll also talk about what we'll be doing.
Pela Tesla, Nugua Quaco de Guisilo, Qua Gayukla Tagas, Coquaqua Quaco. Pela Tesla means welcome. Nugua means my name is. Quaco de Guisilo is my First Nations name. It means woman who honors her people. Gayukla means I am from, and Tagas is the name of the village I come from the northeastern part of Vancouver Island. So I am from the Coquaqua territory, which makes me a visitor to these lands, and I'm very honored and privileged to be able to live in such a beautiful place, and I say hi to the local people for that opportunity. Thank you.
I'm the real Leslie here. Simply get Sigurd Hana, Oyaksik Chenu, Namashwe Lachibu will Paisums. Guy from La Marcia Dawson, Nugua Marcia Dawson, Guy from La Jawadi. What I said to you in my language is, my name is Mamat, which is loosely translated means to tell as a messenger. I'm Gitsan. I grew up in northwestern BC near First Nations near Hazelton. And I also acknowledge my connection to the Kwakakuk, my Kwakakuk family of Kikivinit.
So you'll notice we all have a Kwakwakiwak connection here. We're from the same place. So maybe just a couple of words that I know, again, those of you that are English as a second language, we don't need to add more words, but Gila Kasla is a greeting, is hello. I don't know if you can say it. Gila Kasla. Gila Kasla. And a word that is, so that's from the language, the territory that we come from, northern Vancouver Island. And the other word from this territory, the language is Hokaminum. And they say Haichka. So Haichka is like a thank you. And then if it's a really good thing, you say OCM Haichka. Can you say that? OCM Haichka? So that's probably, hopefully, it'll be something that you will learn. So I'm very pleased to be here just to give a brief introduction. I think another word as well, as Desiree was talking, is the word reconciliation. I don't think that would be I don't know when I would have learned that word in French or Spanish, but in fact, I don't even think I know how to say, well, reconciliation, I can say in French. But so the word reconciliation, I don't know if you guys, does everybody have an understanding of what it is? I really have no idea what I'm talking about. So, well, reconciliation is kind of, in some ways, a buzzword. It's also a very important word in Canada today. As Desiree mentioned, Canada completed a study. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission completed a report about the effects and the issues in residential schools in Canada and the history of what happened in Canada. Okay. I got the signals, thank you. So Canada, of course, as Desiree said, often has a reputation of a country that is very open, free, human rights. We fight for human rights around the world. A lot of that is true, but we have a history in Canada of colonization. We have a history of oppression. We have a history of intentional legislative oppression in Canada that has been targeted at Indigenous peoples, the first peoples of this land, the people who were here before contact. And part of what reconciliation is, and again, there's no one definition, there's many meanings of it, and there's many processes and actions, and we'll have Leslie and Marcia talk about some of the actions that we will do at the college to advance reconciliation, is that it's been a process that has been ongoing and hasn't been resolved yet. We still live in this country, Canada, again, one of the most amazing countries in the world. I think we rank in the top 5 in the world. If we just ranked Canada according to the statistics that Indigenous people have, the original peoples in Canada have, we're way down at like 78 or something like that. So Indigenous people in Canada, we still find ourselves at the negative end of every socioeconomic indicator, except the one that I think is positive, is we have more children, almost double the birth rate of non-Indigenous people. That's a very positive statistic for me. Because I can afford to feed my children, I can afford to educate my children, but not all Indigenous people can. So what's happening in Canada is a move towards reconciling that, to ensuring that Indigenous people take their rightful place within Canada, have all of the opportunities that non-Indigenous people have, I just came back from Iqaluit, and I know there's somebody from Nunavut here. Stand up. So I was very, very fortunate to just come back from Iqaluit and spend time out there with many of my Inuit friends that I have. And just even there, that's a territory in Canada. People, I'm sure you'll share and teach everybody where it is. You know, and they're just struggling there, even just getting the basics. You know, they have their language is struggling. This is the year of Indigenous language. So it's one of the things I'm sure by the end of the year you'll learn some words in Indigenous language. You know, their daycare is struggling, their goods and services. There's a whole pile of issues going on in this country. Canada is a vast country. It's a massive country. And Indigenous people, as Desiree said with residential schools, the goal was to kill the Indian child, to ensure that Indigenous people did not survive, to ensure that we were no longer practicing our cultures, practicing our languages. We are incredibly diverse. The government divides us into 634 First Nations, plus we have the Inuit, plus we have the Métis. There's over 90 Indigenous languages spoken in Canada, with over half of the languages actually spoken in British Columbia, so there's incredible diversity amongst us. And one of the goals with the reconciliation is to ensure that every single Pearson College student, as well as faculty and staff, have a thorough understanding of place and space. It's very important to understand the place that you're on, and that was why Chief Chips was here to start talking about this is his territory. This is his community's territory since the beginning of time. So understanding the place and understanding the space that we all occupy. Desiree mentioned the word privilege as well. It is a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to be a student at Pearson College. And all of us have come from many different backgrounds, many different places. And we have the honor and the privilege to live here, live together, study together. Hopefully you will do some studying. I found in that graph, I went all over the place, depending on the day or depending on the time. So don't worry about, sometimes you really have to study hard, and sometimes all you want to do is just stay in the common room all day. But it's important that we learn about each other, and so we're really committed at Pearson College to ensure that when you leave this community, you will understand, you will know the history of Canada, the history of Indigenous people, as well as hopefully be involved in all kinds of different activities on campus as well as off campus. And these are the two that will help lead us in that.
Thank you. I was brought on board, I was invited by Pearson College to support the journey towards reconciliation, and very honored to have been invited. My background is really about bridging Indigenous and non-Indigenous relationships. I work to try to bring equity for Indigenous people and Indigenous knowledge systems in all aspects of our lives. You know, as you have heard from Desiree and from Corey, our lives have been negatively impacted by colonization and assimilation and the Indian residential schools. And so I set out on a journey, personal journey, because I have 4 boys, raising 4 sons, that I wanted to change their experiences. And so the school system, much like the one that you hear today, changed their experiences from some of the less positive kinds of things that often many of our Indigenous students experience in systems, in schools. And just to give you a fairly quick understanding of my approach, I was working at the University of Victoria, and I was invited to listen to a number of grad students do a presentation on reconciliation. They had learned about the TRC calls to action, and so they had gotten together to talk about what needs to happen to journey towards reconciliation in this country. And so as I listened to their presentations, every single one of them started with the negative socioeconomic conditions of our people, which is true, those are real. And so my feedback to them was, that's all true. Society tends to construct us as poor, education attainment rates, high rates in the justice system, high rates of children in care, poor health status. This is how society constructs our identity. We have our languages, we have our government systems, we have our laws, we have our traditions, we have our ceremonies. This is who we are. So the approach that I'll take in the development of the reconciliation plan for Pearson College will be based on the strength of us as people. We have tremendous knowledge to contribute, to offer the best of both worlds, the best of both worlds in education. And to me, I believe that we need to journey to do that together, as you heard from Desiree. And so what I will be doing over the next several weeks and months is connecting with many of you to hear from you what that needs to look like. And we often say, as I was going to say platforms because I'm so used to using our language, as Indigenous people, truth before reconciliation is fundamentally important in order for us to land in that place where we create that systems change, that paradigm shift that needs to happen. And so it's going to be an important journey together, and it will be a journey that is informed by Pearson. And my job is to pull that information together. And as part of that journey, I was also invited to ensure that the Indigenous students were supported as they started their journey here. And so I worked with Pearson College to do a number of things. And one of the pieces that we did introduce this year for you was inviting Leslie McGarrett, who will be meeting with the Indigenous students weekly to provide our supports to the students. And I actually let Leslie explain that herself. I'm getting tongue twisted. I've had one cup of coffee.
So that's why I passed the microphone to Marcia, because Marcia was invited by the college and Marcia then invited me. So it's kind of that order of how things work. I'm going to be here, as you were saying, helping with the Indigenous students in the college. And also what was shared was there needs to be truth before there can be reconciliation. And truth builds trust, where people start to trust each other a little more. We have a long way to go to actually build that. 7 generations of children went through these residential schools, and that has a huge residual effect on generations. So it's going to take us a while to get there, but I really like the reconciliation concept. And I will definitely, in my role here, be supporting that. Also, I will be referring to the values connected to this college and doing a comparison between what already exists in the First Nations communities. So when I was looking at the grid here, if we look at this from a First Nations perspective, and this is something that First Nations people, Indigenous people share across Canada. If we look at academic, that is mental health. If we look at social, that is emotional health. If we look at solo, that is spiritual health. If we look at action, that is physical health. So mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, when you live those things in balance, it supports everything that you do in your life. So this is very much connected to what First Nations people see as being that, bringing that balance to your life. So we will talk about the medicine wheel and how it's connected to this sort of concept. Also, everything works in a circle because they're not divided. Everything blends together. That's what balance creates when you have that circle there. So this is very much connected to the different things that we will be speaking about with our students to support their time here at the college. We will also be doing, I understand, different workshops with the general population so that everybody can be on the same page about First Nations people. And I always like to support that while we suffer from many of the social issues that are represented across Canada for First Nations people, we also have an inner strength that has brought us here to this day. We are still here. We are still very proud of who we are, proud of our ancestors for getting us here, and we celebrate that daily. So that's going to be a huge part of our gatherings with the First Nations students, and we hope to impart some of that really good energy with the whole student body here. So, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions or concerns? Yes. Yes, good idea. Kwakala. Yeah, but she speaks a different language. Samelka.
Do we want a runner? Like, someone want to take the mic and run around with it? Okay, sorry. Sorry. But guys, this is a great opportunity to ask questions or give feedback and whatever. Just, we got some time, so let's take it. Sure.
I want to ask, do you have something really special like food or festivals in your culture? I'm really curious.
Food is actually the center of our culture, so everything we do is about food. I was told to speak slower and plainer. So for Indigenous people, there's a huge diversity amongst us in Canada, and we all have foods that are very special to us and ceremonies and cultural practices that are very special to us. There's some similarities, so we're from the same nation, and Marcia is from a nation that, we potlatch, and that'll be a whole definition. I don't know if we need to get into that now with English, and Marcia also comes from a First Nation that potlatches, so we have very similar cultural practices. So we do have food, and we do have very unique, and one of the things that this year, hopefully you will experience that, and you'll have a chance to attend certain events and things to experience.
Hi, my name is Anas. Okay, my name is Anas and I'm from Kenya. So my question is, can you please explain the term genocide and reconciliation in the context of what happened in Canada?
So just recently, Canada released the calls to justice. So there was a report on the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. So it's a report, a commission, much like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And it went around Canada and interviewed and researched and did all kinds of information gathering to find out why Indigenous women and girls faced a much higher rate of violence, disappearance, murder, that type of stuff. So they released a report, and in that report they came out with 232 calls to justice. But one of the things that they said in the report is what has happened to Indigenous people in Canada is tantamount, or is like genocide. So there are very specific policies in Canada as early as the 1850s that specifically targeted Indigenous people with the aim to have them die. Whether that was intentional killing, or whether that was killing by starvation because they would keep the food from them, or whether that was by giving them diseases. There's a whole bunch of things that the government of Canada did, and prior to Canada becoming a country. So the pre-colonial government, as well as the current, not current, but the Canadian government, has done to intentionally ensure that Indigenous people died off. So there's a broad spectrum. It is a bit of a debate. Not everybody agrees that it's genocide, but majority of Indigenous people, when you look at the UN Declaration on what a genocide is, the article on genocide, it's very similar to what happened to Indigenous people in Canada.
Just to add to that, one of the intentional things that was introduced was alcohol. Here in British Columbia, that happens in the year 1778. What they don't tell you in the textbooks is that the grade of alcohol was 150 proof. Pure alcohol is 175 proof. And the way you would proof alcohol in the 1700s would be to take an equal amount of alcohol and an equal amount of gunpowder. Pour the alcohol onto the gunpowder, and if it still ignites, that's how you proof the alcohol. This was a deliberate act, and people that received it thought it was a powerful medicine. So they were not taking it socially, like having a glass of wine at dinner. They were giving it to children. They were giving it to the elderly, and many people died instantly because it was like drinking poison. So within a very short period of time, British Columbia loses 1/3 of the population to alcohol poisoning, not alcohol abuse, that would come the next generation because this grade of alcohol was instantly addictive. So that was another sort of process involved in, if you get rid of the population, you don't have to negotiate lands or resources, you can take whatever you want.
Hello, my name is Zach. I come from Yukon Territory in Canada, which is the territory above British Columbia. And I just wanted to highlight something that recently happened in my territory, which I think is a very important part of what reconciliation is, which is giving land back to First Nations. And you heard Chief Rutch Chips talk about how a portion of Pearson's land is going to be given back to the Beecher Bay First Nations. So about a week ago, in my territory, 67,000 square kilometers of land called the Peel Watershed was given back, and a final agreement, land use plan was signed with 4 Yukon First Nations and the Yukon government, which gave back 67,000 square kilometers of land back to these First Nations and their traditional territories. And I think it's a really important part of what reconciliation is, as well as climate change.
And Zach, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think that's something that you, along with Graham, can share with your classmates as you go on throughout the year. And that's his territory is another example of how Canada is very diverse. The Yukon has a self-government agreement, has an agreement where 11 of the 14 First Nations are self-governing, which is what Chief Chip's territory, the nation, is trying to do. And Pearson is a part of that and helping move them forward.
And just to provide more context and understanding, a lot of the historical wrongs that you've heard mentioned here this morning, this far, that's the intent of the calls to action. That's the intent of the commissions that are being undertaken today, because we continue to experience challenges in terms of our rights as Indigenous people in all aspects of our lives, and so in justice and education and health services. And so that's where, while some of these things may have occurred in the early 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s, we're still trying to redress, we're still trying to turn around those impacts on our people. And so that's where that ties into the work that I'll be doing in terms of how do we shift the way in which we provide education and programs and services for our children. To quote the Native American scholar Dr. Lee Brown, he said, "We are a multicultural society living in, learning in a monocultural education system." And I feel like that's relevant to Pearson. You're very multicultural here. You're very diverse, very distinct in who you are. And what we're saying is we need to honor the Indigenous people and culture and language and education.
Hello, my name is Jeff Ackerberg. I'm the politics teacher at the school. There's a second term one often hears in this discussion, which is resurgence. And I'm wondering if you might say a few words about the relationship between resurgence and reconciliation.
I think, again, this, depending on who's saying it, if it's the academy saying it or people, grassroots people saying it, determines the definition of that. But I think what we're seeing is because we are still here, everything that the government and laws and policies and various things that they did that were intentional to destroy us, we survived. We are still here with our language and culture, and reconciliation is a broader, larger concept, I think, and each individual person figures out what that means for them, and each community or each space figures out what that means for them. When I hear the word resurgence, I think of the fact that we're the fastest growing population. We have the largest 55% of our population is under the age of 25. And what we're having and what we're seeing is the young people are not taking it anymore. So there's a resurgence of language, a resurgence of a quest for knowledge and learning. We have one of the parts of colonization as well was non-Indigenous children were removed at birth and adopted out. So we're seeing those people come back and try to figure out where they're from and who they're related to and what they're about. So there's resurgence in every area. There isn't an occupation that we don't see. And for the longest time, I said there was no Indigenous actuarian because that was the one job. These are the people that predict things, but there actually is now. So I don't know of a job or a profession or an area that we don't have Indigenous people. So there's a resurgence of our language, of our knowledge, of our culture, but at the same time there is that recognition and understanding that we can't do this alone. We need non-Indigenous people as well. We have knowledge and lessons and things that can be shared. Talk about climate change. Some of the greatest, earliest climate change advocates. I mean, our whole culture and potlatch system is about respect for nature, is about taking only what you need, is about being. So there's a lot that we can learn. And if we want this nation or if we want people to succeed, then everybody figures out where they are, what they can contribute, and how they can contribute to reconciliation. What are the actions they can do?
I have a question and a comment. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Samuel. I'm a teacher here. Just thank you for sharing. And the time I've been here at Pearson, I have learned a lot about the Indigenous cultures and what has been going on here historically in Canada. And I'm originally from Guatemala. And I see a lot of similarities with Indigenous people in Guatemala, and I bet in all over the world. I bet there's a lot of discrimination still nowadays. And Indigenous populations around the world are the ones that have the least human development because it's intentional in many ways from many states, and Guatemala is not the exception. I wanted to ask you if you as Indigenous nations, if you have communication with other Indigenous peoples around the world to do this a more powerful learning experience, because you may have a lot to share with Indigenous populations from all over the world. That's my question.
I think definitely there are connections, you know, whether it's the one you said where you're from, mining is a huge one. I know there's a lot of Indigenous people in Canada that work all the way down to South America in regards to mining. I think you could pick the area. Definitely there's communication, definitely there's networks, definitely there are people working together. You know, obviously nation states deal with their Indigenous people very differently. And depending on where you're from, there are lessons and things that can be learned and shared. You know, what's happening in the Amazon right now. I mean, if you look at another little kind of fact is Indigenous people in Canada use Facebook more than any other group of people. Facebook and radio, because we don't have reliable cable and, you know, different things like that. So the stuff that is on Facebook, there are international groups and national groups, and absolutely they're sharing and whatnot.
So just to add to what Cora's already said, there are various forums for us to gather as Indigenous people, depending on the sector that you work in. So for example, I spoke at the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. And so there's various types of international gatherings where we do come together on that larger scale. But also individually, I think we make those connections anyway. I think we seek out other Indigenous people. I was in New Zealand this year connecting with them around governance, because that's my passion. Systems change is my passion. And so I met with some Maori folks around the work that they're doing. So we look for some of the progressive types of things that are being done, the forward-moving things that we could learn from each other. So absolutely, there's lots of opportunity to do that. And I think with the introduction of the internet and social media, those connections are far greater now compared to previous decades. Right there.
Hi, my name is Giovanni Martinez. I'm from Venezuela. I have two questions. First one is, how many First Nations are in Canada and what are the differences among them? And the second question is, what do you think that that the Canadian government needs to do to achieve or to complete that reconciliation that you are talking? What do you think that will be the next step in that case to achieve the reconciliation?
So in terms of, so in Canada, when we say Indigenous people, we mean 3 groups of people. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So there's 3 groups of people that make up Indigenous people. So when you say First Nations, so First Nations occupy pretty much everywhere in Canada except for Nunavut. Of course, First Nations people do live there. And we're divided into 634 First Nations. That's an artificial division. So I think if you want to look about similarities or how we're alike, then it's the language groupings. So we have about 80 to 90 languages spoken in Canada, and those were their cultural affiliations or cultural groups. But some provinces will have, like the Prairie provinces, in 3 provinces people will speak Cree. So it's really hard to, so know that there's huge diversity, and it'll take time to learn all of that diversity. And that's one of the things with your classmates. I hope they will share with you as well, the diversity. And just between First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, there's huge diversity. And within each of those groups, there's diversity. So in terms of your questions around Canada, what the Canadian government should do, there's a whole bunch of things I would love them to do. I'd be happy to tell them. I don't know if they'd listen, but we're trying. I think for me, when I think about reconciliation, absolutely we need to have governments take, there's no question climate change and reconciliation are the key issues for Canada. It shouldn't matter what your party affiliation is. These are important, massive issues to Canada and of course to the world when we consider climate change particularly. So in terms of how to move it forward, I always just challenge every Canadian and new Canadians or people who are visitors here, ask what you can do. What can you do in the spaces that you occupy? How can you make it better? So not only how can you make it better for Indigenous people, but when you're in a room, look around the room. If everyone looks like you, there's a problem. You need to figure out how to get people who don't look like you into the room. Whether we still haven't achieved gender parity or equal, males and females are not equal yet in Canada in terms of, of course, in the law they are, but in practice they are not. So how do we open up spaces in Canada to allow other voices and allow that diversity? Diversity is a reality and inclusion is a choice. So I would challenge everybody to ensure that inclusion is the choice that they make.
Oral tradition is a huge part of our cultures across Canada, and this reconciliation is a huge, huge issue. But the Haida people who live in Haida Gwaii, the islands that are north of our Vancouver Island, have a beautiful, beautiful story about how one individual can make a difference. So the story goes that there's a huge forest fire raging out of control, and the bears are encouraging all the animals to go a certain way, to leave the forest, run for your lives. And as they're exiting the forest, there's a little hummingbird that is going back to the fire, back and forth and back and forth. And the bears say to the hummingbird, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Well, haven't you seen the lake over there?" "Yes, we're heading to the lake." She goes, so what she was doing is filling her little tiny beak with water, coming back to the forest and dumping it on the fire and going back. So when the bears asked her again, "What are you doing?" she said, "What I can."
How do you follow that? I just wanted to add, just to your point around, what does the government need to do in terms of achieving reconciliation, and that's a loaded question. And I think that we all have our ideas. It's the government's willingness to do what they need to do. Often folks ask me what I think reconciliation is, And simply put, I'm free to be Indigenous, and we're not there yet. We have all these laws and regulations and systems that impact our lives that are not conducive, that they don't work for us. And so that's what we're trying to change. That's the system change. That's the paradigm shift. And that's what needs to happen. There's not a willingness to make that happen by the government.
So I'll just say thank you for your questions, and we're open. I'm on the board. I come every now and then. I'm also available by email. You will see more of these people, of these ladies, these wonderful people that will tell you even more stories and share more with you. So good luck with first year, and I would say, as Desiree said, one of the most important things, you never regret leaving Pearson College and saying, oh my gosh, I wish I had studied more. The only regret I heard from people at the reunion, and remember, not everybody comes out with a perfect IB. Not everybody comes out with that, but what I heard from people is I wish I had spent more time with the people. So I know who's this older person, much older person telling you that, but that is really what I heard at my 30th reunion, and people just really wanted that time. So, and you'll have people that'll help you find that balance between academics and between the social and spending time with people. So I wish you the best of luck and enjoy the rest of your time.